The Managing Director, ADB, and general supporter of this event, Chief Executive, Ghana Investment Promotion Center, very distinguished resource persons, very distinguished ladies and gentlemen. I was prompted by my colleague, the Minister for Food and Agriculture. I believe that the Chief Executive of GIPC will deal with the investment landscape and what is it that we can do within the agro-processing regime generally. One, first of all, led me to many of our agricultural produce. And as many of you may be aware, the hallmark of President Mahamad's manufacturing policy hinges on value addition, whether it's in the area of mineral resources, where you are talking about bauxite or you are talking about gold. His greatest wish and desire is that we would add value to them even before we engage in the exports of them, let alone to talk about agriculture, which remains predominantly our major economic activity. Those of you who are close watchers of the Ghanaian economy, the service sector is doing much better than the agricultural sector. It may satisfy economists who want to see a change in the structure of the economy, but must disturb those who know that you must take advantage of what you have comparative advantage on in order to up its contribution, particularly to the GDP, if you look at the numbers of employment and others. Suffice it to emphasize that adding value to many of our primary produce, particularly cocoa, remains, as I indicated, the highlight of government's policy. If you take, for instance, many agricultural produce, and just to paraphrase the President in his recent State of the Nation address, we are a country which is spending about $1.5 billion on food imports per annum. You have about $378 million on rice imports alone, 100, and we are capable of producing as a country. It's either a reflection of lack of investment or lack of proper investment or lack of prioritized investment in the agricultural sector of our economy. It is a wish and desire of government to increase, for instance, rice production from the current 380,000 tons to about 800,000 tons, if not a million, before the end of the first term of President John Dramani Mahama. But even with rice, you would talk about how do we process it. I know a particular example of a private investor, Avanash, who have invested in a major rice processing plant. His difficulty in Ghana is no primary raw materials even to produce. He cannot get the paddy rice for purposes of production. That is why your topic for consideration for this forum is very important for us. Agro-processing. How do we add value to many of our agricultural produce? You have tomatoes which gets rotten every other year, if not underproduced. You have citrus and other products in the central and quantities every other year. So I do not need to emphasize the opportunity for agro-processing investment in Ghana exists enormous. In any part of our country, you can establish an agro-processing base and you would have raw materials adequate to exist. You have market which is also assured. I just share one of my own personal frustrations. There's a major company, I won't mention the name so that I don't commit a diplomatic blunder. It is the only entity in Ghana which produces banana for exports, yet it is not Ghanaian. And yet Ghanaians cry that they don't know what to do. That kind of investment is not an investment that government or a good private sector person cannot do in our national economy. I know that many of you enjoy the juices you buy in many of the major supermarkets in London. Thankfully, you are helping the growth of his economy and not the growth of your own domestic economy. This one I have no regret, because my responsibility is the growth and stability of the Ghanaian economy and not any other economy outside the shores of Ghana. But it essentially means that there are enormous opportunities in the agro-processing regime that we have not taken advantage of. I will encourage Boji, who is doing his best to resituate the ADB, to begin to show more interest and invest more in that particular enterprise, even by way of equity. And thankfully, we have amended the EDIF Act, as is aware, and it now provides an opportunity for equity, which we can do through many of you, the financial institutions or other allied bodies, so that even where you are not too encouraged, government will give you the needed support in order to be able to enter the base. I just used two other examples. If you take Brown Half region, Northern, Upper East, Upper West, that half of Ghana, there's not a major one industrial activity of agro-processing, not one. So just look at the landity. Commercial agriculture will do pretty well in that part of the world. The Brown Half remains a major food basket for the country, but they cannot boast of one single agro-processing industrial setup. I was in a meeting with high authorities somewhere when the chief executive of NETCO, Northern, with the Minister for Energy, that of all his revenue, they come from domestic consumers. There's not a single industrial consumer where he can be assured that he would get some income at the end of it. So we will invite potential investors, and I'm sure my sister, even as she still mourns, can do that in terms of getting needed investment into agro-processing regime in our country. Now, if you look at exports and imports, terms of trade and balance of trade, that's why I said I'll just deal with major policy issue. We want to improve our terms of trade. We want to improve our exports regime. And there's also opportunity for export ingredients of it. You'll find shea butter at the bottom of it. We produce shea. If you were to produce it, you'll be feeding many of the cosmetics market of the world. Mango, if you process the pulp, you don't need to sell it within Ghana. You would find market abroad in order to be able to send the pulp for purposes of exports. I can say so for many others, including soya bean and many horticultural produce that are produced in Ghana. So one, to emphasize that we do have an environment that is good enough for you to come and invest in agro-processing. We have adequate quantities, and you yourself can invest in the value chain. If, for instance, you are coming to process, who entered on the basis of a particular legislation, you are still protected by that legislation. So nothing will happen to your investment. You still can repatriate 100% of your profit, subject to payment of legitimate taxes to the state and to the Republic of Ghana. And you still can pay your external partners in foreign exchange. But the principle of wanting to de-dollarize the Ghanaian economy is something principle. I've had difficulty checking into a hotel in Guadalajara, Mexico, because they won't take the dollar or take the pound, except a bank card. At the time, I was rural enough. I didn't know the essence of a bank card. So I had to wait for 2-3 hours before I was ushered in and said, go and come. But in Ghana, you want us to pay rent in dollars, you want us to pay school fees in dollars, you want us to buy food in dollars. It is not an acceptable practice. So it's not a question of driding or criticizing government heavily for a directive that, or 120 days. Why are you asking to convert my money within 90 days instead of the 120 days? That, on a specific case-to-case basis, the governor of the Bank of Ghana, together with government, is able to handle it for you. But we're simply saying that within our domestic economy, let the cedi be a medium of exchange and not a store of value. I'm not too good an economist like Dr. Poji, but I know that the cedi, as I learned basic ordinary economics, was supposed to be a medium of exchange as its primary function. Store of value came somewhere as a fee function or a safe function. But gradually, that was becoming the status of the cedi, where it was more of a store of value, very open in wanting to attract the needed investment. I have had my own worries, and I'm sure I'll get Steve very easily in the corridors here. I've said that he should up funding and support. Why mustn't we support our own to be able to grow it? And it's also a value chain. You must have those who do the poultry feed, you have those who do poultry, and it's an industry that can create jobs. I've been disagreeing with him fundamentally when he said that some of my Ghanaian corporate entities were not doing enough. And I said, for we, the politicians, not support him because he doesn't share his political ideology or philosophy. But truth is that he wants to reach out with him. So, Steve, you may have to tamper justice with mercy and consider supporting alien companies such as Agro, so that he gets what he deserves, because it's our commitment to help him within that particular industry. I'll soon be forwarding to you a request from the Doma Poultry Farmers Group, which we think that, yes, Doma, if we grow the chicken there, it's better than bringing in somebody's 2 or 3 year old chicken that is lying in the fridge somewhere, and then you bring it to celebrate it at home as a good chicken. That brings me to my final policy issue of standardization. We do have the Food and Drugs Board, we do have the Ghana Standards Authority, and we do have the plant protection food that is produced, and every food that is imported, and every food that is exported. Again, in Ghana, it's a peculiar challenge. It's tough war. Food and Drugs Board will tell you this is our mandate. Hey, Ghana Standards Authority, stay away. This is not your mandate. What is important is that is the food entering Ghana or produced in Ghana safe enough to be consumed, that it does not compromise us on health, it protects life, and gives us an opportunity to meet minimum well phytosanitary conditions. I recently had a trip to Japan and subsequently to Turkey, and I was trying to find new markets for Ghanaian exports. One of the major constraints for it, what they're saying is that apply minimum levels of fertilizer. So, Uncle Dapa, you must come and discipline your plant protection and veterinary services to ensure that we do have compliance. And that leads me to the next aspect of your team. We comply with the minimum regulatory standards. I'm hazarding sharing this information with you. The EU, the European Union, have expressed grave concern about some of our export products because of our inability to satisfy basic minimum standards, which may compromise health, may compromise life. I note with satisfaction that in one of the forums in Brussels, when they said there was concern about cadmium levels in cocoa, I couldn't drink the next bottle of water in front of my table until Amajaro whispered to me that no, they are not talking about Ghana cocoa. It may be cocoa coming from some other part of the world.